Good morning. Hello, this is Joanne Diaz, and I am here to teach the new online version of Shakespeare and film. Wow. Okay, we're going to give this a whirl. Let me get all of my things organized. Okay. So I am using this software program to share with you some of the material that we would have used together if today were our first day back from spring break. Let me give you a sense of how this video will go, and most likely the rest of the videos for the rest of the semester. First of all, I hope that you and all of your family members are doing well. I hope you are healthy. I hope you are safe. I hope you have you are thinking of your neighbors and friends and keeping in touch with them as best you can, whether through video, phone calls, letters, whatever it is. This is an extraordinary time, and we're going to do the best we can. So here's what we're going to do together in the time that we have this morning. First, we're going to do something that's a little bit unusual, which is we're going to start with a writing activity. And so to do that, I would encourage you to get your Shakespeare and film notebook or any piece of paper that you want to use for this writing activity. It'll take about 7 minutes. And then after that, we're going to jump right into the content of our class today. So we're going to briefly talk about a few key scenes in Hamlet. Specifically, we're going to focus on Ophelia today. And we agreed, weeks ago that we needed to spend some time thinking about her character. We're going to do that today. And then I'm going to provide you with a brief introduction to Laurence Olivier's film version of Hamlet from 1948. To do that, I'll talk about two styles of film that were really central to his thinking as a director, and that's German Expressionism and film Noir. And those are film traditions that are so rich and complex that we could spend the whole semester just talking about those. We're not able to do that, but that's okay. We can at least begin the conversation. All right. So, just one comment I want to make, and that's to the seniors in our class. And there are a few of you who are seniors who are planning on graduating in a traditional way this May. I just want to tell you how sorry I am that you will not get to walk across the dais in May and get all your honors and accolades and so forth. But I want to thank you for staying home, for staying put. What you are doing is a public good. You are staying home for all of us. And so every time you feel really sad about all the things you're missing in these final weeks of the semester, I just want you to remember that we're all in this together and that you are doing something for your elders and for the most vulnerable people in our nation. Yes, you're doing something very special by staying home. And I want you to be proud of that and know that I am grateful to you. So thank you. I'd like to start with a writing activity. That's something that we don't normally do in this literature class, but these are extraordinary times. And we as English majors and minors, college students in general, we are very gifted because we can write, we can read, we can reflect, we can remember. And this is a writing activity that I have found to be very beneficial, especially when I am feeling stressed or anxious and I want to try to be mindful. So I'm going to start by showing you a slide. And this is a page from Linda Barry's book titled Syllabus, Notes from an Accidental Professor. And in this book, she's an incredibly creative person. She's written graphic novels, memoir. She is an esteemed teacher on creativity and writing and drawing. She's such an incredibly talented, prolific person. And I strongly encourage you to look her up and learn more about her work if you like this activity. This activity takes about 7 minutes total, and I'm sharing this slide with you so that you can see basically what she's expecting you to do. So the first step is to get your notebook. This is my notebook. I keep all sorts of things in it. I sort of use it like a commonplace book. I use it for notes. I use it for drawings. I use it for lists of things that I have read or want to read. I don't necessarily use it every single day, but I use it a lot. Little notes that people send me that I don't want to forget. But I also use it for this 7-minute activity when I'm not sure what I want to write about or I'm feeling a little bit scattered. This is an activity that grounds me every time. So you get a pen. This is the first step. Here's what you're going to do. I'm going to show you my notebook and also you see Linda Barry's slide as well. So step 1, you're going to draw a line down the middle of your page. All right, I'm going to do that with you. Let's do that right now together. And you'll see how this works in just a second. I'm going to take my blank page and I'm going to draw a line down the middle. Simple. Step 2, I'm going to draw a line across the page about a third of the way down. So not halfway, about a third of the way down. You'll see why in a minute. Okay, so now I've got my quadrants there, all right? And in the upper left quadrant, I'm going to time you. I'm going to get my timer here. I've got my handy phone. And I'm going to, for 2.5 minutes, I'm going to ask you, look what Linda Barry asks you to do. You start by noticing what you notice. As you go about your day, you do things sometimes intentionally and other times by accident. Both sorts of events should be welcome in your list of things you did. Include 7 to 10 things each day. Okay, so why don't you think about yesterday, and at the top of the upper left corner of your page, I want you to write down what I did. All right? For the next 2.5 minutes, I want you to write down a list of everything you did yesterday. I don't care how boring it was, how silly, how mundane, anything at all. Write a list for 2.5 minutes. These could be phrases, sentences, as long as they're specific, doesn't matter. Ready? And I'm going to do this with you. I'm going to time this for 2.5 minutes. Ready? Go. Okay, now you stop. That was 2.5 minutes. And now for the next 30 seconds, this is just 30 seconds in the bottom left corner. You're going to write down something you heard someone say yesterday. It could be anything. It could be something funny, something boring, something you've heard a million times, something you've never heard before. Just take 30 seconds and see what you can remember. An exact quote of something that someone said yesterday. Go. Okay, stop wherever you are. Now I want you to go in the upper right-hand column, and I want you to write down a list, just phrases and details for 2.5 minutes of what you saw. Notice that what you saw is not the same as what you did. This is a more image-driven exercise. What you saw, as Linda Barry says in the slide that I'm showing you right now, you may find yourself staring at something for no reason, a label on a bottle of juice, a pigeon, a wisp of hair on the nape of someone's neck, or you may see something spectacular, a fight or a fire or an accident. All are welcome on your list of things you saw. It's kind of interesting, right? So for 2.5 minutes, I'm going to reset the timer, and I want you to write a list of things you saw. Ready? Go. Okay, stop wherever you are. And for the last 30 seconds of this exercise, I want you to draw a picture of something you saw. Um, it could be anything from that list of what you saw, right? So you just made a list for the past 2.5 minutes. Maybe you can draw one of those things. We have a tendency in our culture to just snap pictures all the time because we've got our phones. But drawing does something different cognitively than just taking a picture and pressing a button. So for 30 seconds, draw a picture of something you saw. Okay, stop. So, just to give you a sense of what I did with this, truly, there's no wrong way to do this exercise. What did I do? Well, it won't surprise anyone to know that my life has been pretty boring and pretty routine, probably like many of you. What did I do? I walked with Gus in the snow as it got dark at 7 p.m. Yeah, yay. What big deal? I made ramen with carrots and scallions and tofu and spinach. Okay. Practiced piano. Worked on Hamlet lesson plan. Whatever. Uh, and then for my quote, my son is inventing a coronavirus song to the tune of It's Raining, It's Pouring. Ugh, talk about macabre. Anyway, so I wanted to write that down though because it's not something I'm exactly enjoying right now. But I wanted to remember that he's trying to make a song about it in order to make sense of what's happening, at least in his world. Things I saw, my husband in his pajamas, my boots in the mud, morning paper, people walking their dogs on the sidewalk. And then I drew from my drawing I drew a picture of a packet of ramen because we made that ramen I talked about. I don't know. I don't know if I'll do anything with this, but I know I did it yesterday, and I know I did this activity a few days ago as well. Um, and the more often I do this activity, the more often I remember this very unique time in our lives, and the more likely I will be to reflect, to watch, to look, to see. And this class is all about seeing and looking. All right, we're looking at cinema, the history of film as it relates to Shakespeare. So we should be observant and mindful of what's going on around us because there has never been any time like this in our lives, and we should remember it. Okay, so what I'd love to do, so that I know that you watched this video, I would love for you to send me a photo of what you did during those 7 minutes. That way I know you're listening, watching, paying attention. A for effort, A for participation. All right. So let's segue to the content of our class for today, which is you might recall, this was weeks ago now. I feel like it's been a long time since we've seen each other, but you might recall that when we last met, we spent a lot of time in the week before spring break talking about Hamlet as part of the revenge tragedy tradition, as part of the revenge tragedy genre. We talked about some of the key features of that genre, the idea that Hamlet is an avenger who sees a wrong, a moral transgression, in this case, the murder of his father. He knows it's happened. His father has told him to avenge his death, but he cannot go through normal legal channels to prosecute the murderer because the murderer is the king. Okay, so that's a very common feature of revenge tragedy. We talked about the obsession with moral corruption and political corruption in revenge tragedies. We talked about ghosts and the supernatural as sometimes being a feature of revenge tragedies. We talked about the meta-theatrical qualities of revenge tragedies, how concerned they are with the play within a play concept, which Hamlet has. We spent quite a bit of time talking about these things. I spent a lot of time in class talking about Fortinbras, right? And how he is a threat to Denmark that Claudius actually handles fairly well, at least at the beginning of the play. The Fortinbras plot, you're going to see this week when you watch Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. There is no reference to Fortinbras. There is no reference to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Olivier really strips down the plot of his film version for some very specific reasons that we'll talk about in a minute. But for now, what I'd like to do is focus on Ophelia just for a little while because I know a lot of you are very interested in her, concerned with her, and what the play is doing with her. What I'd like to suggest to you is that Shakespeare might be using Ophelia as a character that helps him understand gender dynamics and power in the play. I'm not going to attribute names to these Moodle responses. If you wrote these, you know who you are. And students in our class, you can look on Moodle to see who wrote these. I'm trying to protect people's privacy because I'm posting this on YouTube. But I liked these responses quite a bit, and I just wanted to share them as a way to start our discussion. So one student wrote, I have mixed feelings about Ophelia. I thought she was a really interesting character, despite the fact that she could get kind of annoying. I'd really like to talk about her more in class, though, and really dig into her insanity, maybe just gain some more understanding about her as a whole. I'm interested to see where our class discussion will take us because there is just so much to dissect here. I'm not really sure where to start. I agree, there's a lot, and we'll try to at least use a few key scenes in the play to see if we can understand what's happening with Ophelia. Another student wrote, I also feel like the biggest victim in the play was Ophelia. Sweet Ophelia, controlled and stirred by men around her, brother and father who make her spy on her lover, a lover who denies his love and asks her to become a nun, and the death of her father. Lastly, death by drowning in water near a bed of flowers. She did not deserve to die. All the characters die. They all have some fault or mistakes, but Ophelia was an innocent character. It was like killing a young, innocent child. It seemed very unfair. That's a really interesting observation. The idea that the way in which other characters die in this play, you get a sense that maybe there's some culpability there, some way in which they're complicit in moral corruption or murder in the court. Ophelia doesn't really have anything to do with it. That's an interesting observation. I like this one. The student wrote in bold, I love Ophelia. Let me get my face out of the way here so I can read this really nice response. Her character is so minor and so abused within this novel. It's a play, but I get what you want. But she intrigues me so much. Mentally, she is going insane while Hamlet is faking insanity. Interesting. Is it his fault? Entirely. All of her torment is brought about by Hamlet, who literally kills her father. She doesn't know that, but it's true. We know that. There's a moment of dramatic irony, right? And then acts as though he never loved her and pushes her away, which drives her insane. There's so much within her character to dive into and so much we don't know. That's true too. One of the biggest things is if her suicide was because she was weak or if she was actually strong. That's a very interesting question, and I think we need to talk about that during the time that we have together. Oh, I am going to hang on to that for a moment. What I'm going to do now is, let me look at my notes. Oh, yeah, this is what I'd like to say in response to some of these Moodle responses. I'm going to read through some key passages where we see how Ophelia's agency functions in the play. If you recall the play, you're going to remember she has very little agency. She doesn't get to act or feel or think a lot on her own. She doesn't have a lot of mobility. She doesn't get a lot of choices. Her choices are made for her in many ways, right? And you might disagree with that, but that's an observation I'd like to at least start with as a basic point. So let's look at some moments in the play where characters are telling her how to think and feel, which is a real concern for me in this play. To do that, I'm going to go to the Folger Shakespeare play online. I don't assume that you have your books. So you know that a couple of weeks ago I shared the syllabus with you. I hope you read that syllabus. And if you did, you know that I provided a link to the Folger Shakespeare for you to read if you don't have your book with you. Okay, so I'm going to use that, all right? And if you have already gone to that website, you know that we can go to Act 1, Scene 3. That's where we're going to begin. And I'm going to scroll down. Yeah, we're going to look at Act 1, Scene 3 quite a bit for the next few minutes. I'm also we're going to read through some passages in Act 1, Scene 3. And I'm going to play a recording. I'm going to play Kenneth Branagh's film version of Hamlet so that you can listen while I'm scrolling through the words and you can see what's happening. All right? So, some questions I want you to think about as you're listening and watching. Why does Laertes feel compelled to give Ophelia this advice? Let's just start with that one question, all right? And hopefully you can hear the recording or the film and what the actors are saying to each other while we watch the text on the screen. Okay, here we go.
My necessaries are embarked. Farewell. And sister, as the winds give benefit and convoy is assistant, do not sleep. But let me hear from you.
You doubt that.
For Hamlet and the trifling of his favour, hold it a fashion and a toy in blood. A violet in the youth of primy nature, forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting, the perfume and suppliance of a minute. No more.
No more, but so.
Think it no more. For nature crescent does not grow alone in thews and bulk, but as his temple waxes, the inward service of the mind and soul grows wide with wool. Perhaps he loves you now. And now no soil nor quartal doth besmirch the virtue of his will, but you must fear. His greatness weighed, his will is not his own. For he himself is subject to his birth. He may not, as unvalued persons do, carve for himself, for on his choice depends the sanity and health of the whole state, and therefore must his choice be circumscribed unto the voice and yielding of that body whereof he is the head. Then if he says he loves you, it fits your wisdom so far to believe it, as he in his particular act and place may give his saying deed, which is no further than the main voice of Denmark goes within. And weigh what loss your honour may sustain if with too credent ear you list his songs, or lose your heart, or your chaste treasure open to his unmastered importunity. Fear is, Ophelia, fear it, my dear sister, and keep within the rear of your affection, out of the shot and danger of desire. The chariest maid is prodigal enough if she unmask her beauty to the moon. Virtue itself scapes not calumnious strokes. The canker gulls the infants of the spring too oft before their buttons be disclosed, and in the morn and liquid dew of youth, contagious blasphements are most imminent. Be wary then, best safety lies in fear. Youth to itself rebels, though none else near.
I shall the effect of this good lesson keep as watchman to my heart.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there for a moment. Hopefully you were able to hear that. And if not, you saw the text. Laertes is the brother of Ophelia, and he's about, you might recall that in Act 1, Scene 2, he received permission from Claudius to go back to France. And so he's about to embark on that journey to return to France, and he's giving advice to Ophelia. She didn't ask for it, but he feels compelled to give it. And the primary piece of advice he is giving to her is about Hamlet. What that tells us, this is our first introduction to the relationship between Ophelia and Hamlet. This is our first sense of the nature of their relationship. Ophelia barely says anything about how she feels about Hamlet until later in the play. But Laertes feels compelled to say to her, for Hamlet and the trifling of his favor is just a trifle, it's a nothing. Hold it a fashion and a toy in blood. So he may be saying to you that he feels deeply for you, he loves you. This is just a passing fancy. It's just a toy that he's trifling with. It's a nothing. He's just being youthful. It's not permanent. It's not everlasting. And she's like, really? Okay. And so he continues to meditate on how passing this trifling love of Hamlet's is. But then he explains why it's important for Ophelia to fear Hamlet's emotions. This is important. There are two really important things to take away from Laertes' speech. He may not as unvalued persons do, carve for himself, for on his choice depends the safety and the health of his whole state. Okay, so what he's saying is, Hamlet, even if he loves you, even if he says he wants to love you forever, it doesn't matter. He doesn't get to choose who he loves. His family is going to choose for him the best relationship that will cement the dynastic and political relations of the realm. This has nothing to do with love. And so Laertes is reminding Ophelia that Hamlet is a political being. His body politic is what will determine whom he marries. That's interesting. Okay, the other thing that's really important in what Laertes says is not only does Hamlet not have a choice over this, but you, dear sister, have to protect your chastity. So this is a very patriarchal message that Laertes is giving to Ophelia. He's saying to her, your chastity is your treasure. And if you open that treasure, I love this line right here. If you lose your heart or your chaste treasure open to his unmastered importunity, then you will have damaged not just yourself, but this family, right? Your reputation is your value, and your reputation is based on your chastity in the Renaissance if you are a woman. That's very important to understanding how limited Ophelia's choices are in this passage. And then look at what he does with the meter here. Usually it's iambic pentameter, right? Da-dun, 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 da-dun. It's a nice walking beat. But Shakespeare varies it there. He says, fear it, Ophelia. Fear it, my dear sister. He's saying, pay attention. I'm going to use a trochee. Fear it, Ophelia. Fear it, my dear sister. Because he wants her to be alert, right? Don't be prodigal and just give it away for free. This guy may not marry you anyway, and if he doesn't, then you're ruined. Whoa. Okay, so there's a lot at stake here. And Ophelia says, yes, I've listened to your lesson. That's great. But do as you say, and you be chaste while you're abroad as well. And Laertes like, oh, fear me not. Now, what that suggests to me is that she feels compelled to tell Laertes to watch out for being a little too promiscuous himself, which might suggest that maybe he has a problem with that. That's interesting. Anyway, let's jump ahead. Polonius comes into the scene. He gives some hackneyed advice to Laertes while he's abroad in Paris. And then Laertes leaves. And then Polonius, let me jump ahead if I can. Bear with me if you could. Gotta be patient with these technologies. I know I'm violating at least 15 types of copyright law by showing you. Sorry, Castle Rock Entertainment. Sorry, Kenneth Branagh, but I'm doing it for educational purposes. This is life. Okay, so now we're going to listen to what. So we already know what Laertes is saying to Ophelia for advice. Let's see what Polonius says to Ophelia. Again, notice he's not asking her opinion. He's not asking her how she feels and thinks and where she wants to go and not go. He feels compelled to impose his judgment on her. Watch this.
What is it, Ophelia, he has said to you?
So please you. Something touching the Lord Hamlet.
Very well bethought. It is told me he hath very oft of late given private time to you. And you yourself have of your audience been most free and bounteous. If it be so, as so 'tis put on me, and that in way of caution, I must tell you, you do not understand yourself so clearly as it behoves my daughter and your honor. What is between you? Give me up the truth.
He hath, my lord, of late, made many tenders of his affection to...
Affection? Pooh! You speak like a green girl unsifted in such perilous circumstance. Do you believe his tenders, as you call them?
I do not know, my lord, what I should think.
Mary, I'll teach you. think yourself a baby that you have ta'en his tenders for true pay, which are not sterling. Tender yourself more dearly, or not to crack the wind of the poor phrase running it thus, you tender me a fool.
My lord, he hath importuned me with love in honourable fashion.
Aye, fashion you may call it. Go to.
And hath given countenance to his speech, my lord, with almost all the holy vows of heaven.
Aye, springes to catch woodcocks. I do know when the blood burns how prodigal the soul lends the tongue vows. These blazes, daughter, giving more light than heat, extinct in both, even in their promise, as it is a making, you must not take for fire. From this time, daughter, be somewhat scandal of your maiden presence. Set your entreatments at a higher rate than a command to parley. For Lord Hamlet believes so much in him that he is young, and with a larger tether may he walk than may be given you. In few, Ophelia, do not believe his vows, for they are brokers, not of the dye which their investments show, but mere implorators of unholy suits, breathing like sanctified and pious bawds, the better to beguile. This is for all. I would not in plain terms from this time forth have you so slander any moment leisure as to give words or talk with the Lord Hamlet. Look to it, I charge you. Come your ways.
I shall obey, my lord.
Okay, again, I hope you could hear the actors while we were reading. A few things to take away from that passage. You might recall, so we talked about this actually with Romeo and Juliet. We talked about how Romeo, as a young man, has a lot of flexibility, a lot of movement, a lot of freedom, a lot of friends. He is a mobile, agile agent of action in Romeo and Juliet, whereas Juliet is not. She's enclosed. She's like her high security guardian. She is bound by the balcony. She can't move through space in the same way as Romeo can. And basically, Polonius is picking up on that idea. Again, he's saying, Hamlet is young. He can move around. He has here it is. For Lord Hamlet believes so much in him that he is young, and with a larger tether may he walk than may be given you. That's just so Polonius is just being realistic with Ophelia and saying, you can't sleep with whomever you want to sleep with. You can't send love letters to whomever you like. You can't entertain these attentions from Hamlet, who is elsewhere in the play. Polonius says Hamlet is out of thy star. He is higher than you. Yeah, you are not royalty. He is. If he were to marry you, it would be beneath him. So he's, again, there's all this pressure on Ophelia to obey her brother, obey her father, and it's very important that Shakespeare has that be the final line of this passage. I shall obey, my lord. Ophelia may love Hamlet, but her father is her master. Her father is her boss. In a patriarchal society, that's all she's got. And notice she doesn't have a mother. There is no mother present. There's no mother alluded to. Perhaps she died long ago. Well, for whatever reason, she is not present in this play. There's no one she can go to for any sort of feedback or any sort of anything besides her father and her brother, who are the patriarchal forces in the family. That's very interesting to me. And I'm going to go to Act 2, and you can follow along with me in your book. Act 2, Scene 1, around, let's see if this works. It's all an experiment, people. The next time we see Ophelia, she comes to Polonius very distraught. Keep in mind, by this point in the play, Hamlet has seen his father's ghost. He is not only now deep in grief, but he is deeply disrupted and upset by the fact that his ghost has appeared to him. It's horrible. I mean, it's an encounter with the dead. How terrifying, right? And so the first thing think about this, he's so close to Ophelia that imagine a scenario in which he sees his father's ghost and is so disheveled and so confused and distraught by it, he goes straight to see Ophelia. That suggests to me that she's the one that Hamlet might feel closest to. that she might be the one he's most eager to share these things with. Very interesting. And so Ophelia doesn't understand why. She doesn't know why Hamlet is upset. So she goes to her father, who again is the patriarch, he's the boss, and she's upset. So Polonius says, "With what in the name of God?" And Ophelia says, "My lord, as I was sewing in my closet, Lord Hamlet, with his doublet all unbraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered, and down jived to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous and purport, as if he had been loosed out of hell to speak of horrors, he comes before me. Mad for thy love? My lord, I do not know. What said he? He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm, and with his other hand thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as he would draw it. He looked at me so carefully. Basically, she's saying he looked at me as if he wanted to draw my face. That's how attentive he was to each feature. Long he stayed he so, at last a little shaking of mine arm, and thrice his head thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh so piteous and profound as it did seem to shatter all his bulk and end his being. That done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulder turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes, for out of doors he went without their helps, and to the last bended their light on me. Oh my God, what a description of a person. He doesn't even have words. He's so horrified by his father's ghost. All he wants to do is reach out to this woman he loves. He doesn't even have the words to describe what he's seen. And so Ophelia doesn't know what he's seen. Ophelia doesn't know that he's been commanded to avenge his father's death. Wow. Okay, but we know. That's that dramatic irony that we discussed in class. Very important. This guy, Polonius. Oh, I hate Polonius. Yeah, look what he says. Knee-jerk reaction. Come, go with me. I will go seek the king. This is the very ecstasy of love whose violent property foredoes itself and leads the will to desperate undertakings, as oft as any passions under heaven that does afflict any. No, it's not love sickness. Polonius, sorry to tell you. Of course he's in love with Ophelia. That's fine. But that's not what's happening here. He's confusing matters. And Polonius's confusion, his snap judgment, and his desire to protect the chastity of Ophelia gets things in the way. That's interesting. Okay, in the interest of time, let's jump ahead to Act 3, Scene 1. Ready? I'm doing the best I can here. Act 3, Scene 1. Ooh, round line, maybe 97. Let's see where that gets us. I like this folder of Shakespeare online. It's kind of nice. Let's go to Act 3, Scene 1 in the Folger edition. It might look different in your edition. Amazing scene. This is the scene that immediately follows the to be or not to be speech. Keep in mind that by this point in the play, Polonius has said to the king, I think I know why why Hamlet is going nuts. I think he is in love with my Ophelia, and we're going to stage a situation where she's going to walk around and get Hamlet's attention, and we're going to surveil the two of them together. We're going to spy on them to see how crazy he is and how it's my daughter that's making him crazy. So that means Ophelia's in on the game. Why would she do this? Why would she allow her father Polonius and King Claudius to spy on her and Hamlet as she's talking to Hamlet and returning his love letters? My question is, what choice does she have, right? She is truly a prisoner of patriarchy. She is truly a person with no choice in the matter. So by the time we get to this scene, we know that she knows she's being watched. And partway through the scene, it's apparent that, or at least it's at least possible that Hamlet knows that they're being watched as well. And that affects his performance. That affects his reaction to the situation. All right. So I don't know if we have time to read this whole passage. You could do part of that on your own. But right after the to be or not to be speech, Ophelia comes in and he goes from soliloquy to conversation. And so I'm around line 96. in Act 3, Scene 1. Hamlet says, "Soft you now, the fair Ophelia, nymph in thy orisons be all my sins remembered." And she says, "Good my lord, how does your honor for this many a day?" "I humbly thank you. Well, my lord, I have remembrances of yours that I have longed to redeliver. I pray you now receive them." She's giving his love letters that he wrote back to him. He says, "No, not I. I never gave you aught." And Ophelia says, "My honored lord, you know right well you did, and with them words of so sweet breath composed as made the things more rich. Their perfume lost, take these again. For the noble mind, rich gifts wax poor when givers prove unkind." There, my lord. She says, "Look, I'm not really the person who should be receiving these beautiful lines of poetry. I don't love you anymore. I'm not the object of your desire anymore." And he says, "Ha, are you honest?" She said, "My lord, are you fair?" "What means your lordship?" "That if you be honest and fair, your honesty should admit no discourse to your beauty." "Could beauty, my lord, have better commerce than with honesty?" "Ay, truly, for the power of beauty will sooner transform honesty from what it is to a bawd, than the force of honesty can translate beauty into his likeness." This was sometimes a paradox, but now the time gives it proof. I did love you once. That's important. He did. He loved her. And she doesn't say, "I loved you too," but she says, "Indeed, my lord, you made me believe so." This play, it never really gives us a chance to hear Ophelia speak her true desires and speak her true wants. It's very painful, isn't it? "You should not have believed me, for virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish of it. I loved you not. I was the more deceived." This is that cruelty that some of you wrote about in your modal responses, isn't it? This moment where he gets really misogynistic and really cruel, or at least it seems that way, right? Now look what happens here. This is a really exciting moment dramatically. Right after he says, "I loved you not," is this very, very famous scene. Hamlet says, "Get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners?" Why would you get pregnant and have babies who sin? Basically, that's what he's saying, right? "I am myself indifferent honest, but yet I could accuse me of such things that it were better my mother had not borne me. I am very proud, revengeful, ambitious, with more offences at my beck than I have thoughts to put them in, imagination to give them shape, or time to act them in." He's basically saying, I'm a proud person. I'm about to commit an act of revenge. She doesn't know that yet, but he does. I'm ambitious. He's ambitious? That's interesting because that suggests to me that he may want to be king. Ha! Okay, that's related to Claudius. With more offences at my beck than I have thoughts to put them in, imagination to give them shape, or time to act them in. He's acknowledging his limits as a human. He's acknowledging his sins, his wrongdoings, his vanities. What should such fellows as I do crawling between earth and heaven? What right do I have to be alive? What is the point of, and that harkens back to his to be or not to be speech, right? "We are arrant knaves all, believe none of us. Go thy ways to a nunnery." And then here's the sentence that's really important. "Where's your father?" "At home, my lord." That's the hinge. That's the moment where actors can make a decision on whether Hamlet suspects that they're being listened to. And he says, "Let the doors be shut upon him, that he may play the fool nowhere but in his own house. Farewell. I'm getting out of here because now I know I'm being listened to." Ha ha ha. Very interesting, okay? And he continues with his curses on Ophelia, more of his misogyny. Now, he says to a nunnery, "Go," and then he leaves. When you hear that, you might think he's saying, go to a nunnery so that you can never have sex with anybody else and you never have to marry anyone else. And you never have to play the role of the woman in this misogynist framework that he's creating. But what if he's saying go to a nunnery because he knows how treacherous not only Claudius is and Gertrude, but Polonius? And he might be trying to protect Ophelia by saying, go to a nunnery. Get yourself out of this court, which is corrupt. It's morally bankrupt. It's violent. It's going to become more violent. Go to a nunnery to protect yourself because I love you. That's really interesting, right? After that, Ophelia praises Hamlet, and this is really one of the few spots we have where we hear her true loves and desires, right? She says, "Oh, what a noble mind is here overthrown. The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword, the expectancy and rose of the fair state." Hamlet's a courtier, he's a soldier, he's a scholar, he's the hope of the state. Like he's prince, right? He could become king someday. Sorry, I gotta plug in my computer. Hold on. He everyone is hoping for him to be a great prince and king. Um, and now he's the glass of fashion and the mold of form. Basically, he's like a man of his time. He's super hot. The observed of all observers. Wherever he goes, people are watching him because he's so handsome and intelligent and good at everything he does. Quite down. Look how dejected he has been. Look what he has become. We could go on with this scene, but this is, after this, we see Polonius gets murdered by Hamlet. That's not something that Ophelia ever knows, but it does lead her down a very sad path of insanity, and then she does take her life by suicide. She drowns in the river. All of that is stuff that we could talk about. In the interest of time, I'm going to leave you to return to those readings and to watch in the film how Laurence Olivier handles Ophelia's death. She's an incredible character, and just a few thoughts that I have about her. And these don't have to be your thoughts. I don't assume you agree with me, but for me, Ophelia is a very important twin in some ways to Hamlet. Like Hamlet, she has a father who is murdered. And like Hamlet, she is negotiating madness. I don't think Hamlet goes mad. I think he is truly grieving. I think has an encounter with the supernatural in the form of his dead father, and I think he's very disoriented and rattled by that. He feigns madness. He puts on an act in which he's mad, but I don't think he goes mad. But Ophelia does. And that gives you a real sense of how her lack of control and agency in this play really takes a toll on her, and what the real cost of violence and corruption in this court. I think that's very important. She's a very important character in this play. Okay, in the time we have left, I'm going to try to keep it brief, but it's important that I give you an introduction of what you're going to see in this week's film. So what I'm going to do is shift gears a bit and go back to my PowerPoint. Bear with me. I'm going to talk for a minute about Laurence Olivier, otherwise known as the Hotness. Woo! There he is. Oh my God, he's just so handsome. Just love him. I love him. Laurence Olivier was certainly, if not the most important, one of the most important Shakespearean actors, directors of the 20th century. He is responsible for so much of what we now love about Shakespeare and film. He had many great Shakespeare films that he acted in and directed. We're focusing on Hamlet, but you could look at Othello, Henry V, Richard III, extraordinary films. He's also very important to Shakespeare on stage, and his legacy lives on the stage because he is responsible for the National Theatre in London. So if you, after this quarantine is done, and someday you have a chance to travel to London, I hope you'll go to the National Theatre and see a performance. That is his gift to us that will live on for many years to come. He's an amazing, amazing actor, and it was very important to him to make Shakespeare accessible to all of us. That was a real goal he had in his interpretation of Shakespeare. In the film that you're going to watch this week, and if you're wondering where it is, I provided a link on our syllabus, so please read the syllabus that I provided a couple of weeks ago. Please write to me to confirm that you've read it. If you have questions about it, you let me know. Email, Google Meet, I don't care. I'll answer questions as I have them. Anyway, You're going to watch the film on YouTube. It's free. It's open to the public. It has Portuguese subtitles, so you'll learn Portuguese while you're learning Hamlet. What can I say? You can also rent it, right? You can rent it on Amazon Prime, a number of other platforms, but I'm trying to save you money, right? I know we're all trying to be careful with our wallets, so a free version is available on YouTube. Otherwise, rent it on Amazon Prime, which is what I did. So let's get to it. You may want to write all of this down. I'm also going to share this, the PowerPoint with you. Laurence Olivier is, as director of this film, is drawing from two major threads in film history. And these threads are braided, they're intertwined. You can't separate them from each other because one directly informs the other. The first is German Expressionism, which I will describe in a moment, and film noir. So let's talk about German Expressionism. What is that? German Expressionism was an early 20th century art movement that influenced all art forms, but we're going to focus on how it influenced film. It emphasized the actor's inner life and ideas and was less interested in replicating reality than it was in replicating a psychological state. So Freud's psychoanalysis was something that was finally becoming a part of mainstream discourse at exactly the same time as silent film and then early film with sound was starting to evolve in innovative ways. So, what's happening historically in the 1920s and 30s when German Expressionism was influencing German film directors? Well, Germans were trying and often failing to recover from the traumas of World War I. As you might recall, they were roundly defeated in World War I, and the subsequent impoverishment that ordinary Germans faced in the 20s and into the 30s was a subject of concern for film directors. And I'll leave it at that because there's so much more we could say about it. But it's important to know that financial despair, political despair, disillusionment, trauma from World War I, those definitely shaped German Expressionism. The films are often concerned with madness and betrayal, crimes that go unprosecuted. The mood of films that are in the German Expressionist style are very dark and moody. And this is important for the next thread, which is film noir. A lot of the German and often Jewish directors that were using tropes of German Expressionism, they were part of the avant-garde of German filmmaking. And because they were persecuted in the 1930s in Germany by Adolf Hitler's regime, they became exiles, and many of them sought exile in the United States when the Nazis gained power. And many of them became some of the greatest American directors that we have in the history of film. So Fritz Lang moved to Hollywood, Billy Wilder, Otto Preminger, and many others. So that's important to keep in mind because what happens is when they move to Hollywood, they help to innovate a whole genre called film noir. And we're going to talk about that right now. And then I'm going to show you some slides to give you examples of what to look for with these styles in film. Like German Expressionism, film noir is very dark. The film's texture reflects darkness, seediness, loneliness, self-centeredness. Film noir creates a world of gloom and bleakness, and the characters are defined by their solitude or imprisonment. We often get a very psychological view of the criminal. There's often a very fatalistic point of view in film noir. There's a preoccupation with crime, with fragmentation of identity, with female duplicity, a very bleak tone. So in the time that we have left, I'm going to call your attention to some of the important ways that Olivier is drawing from these threads to create something new in Shakespeare's Hamlet. So let's just take a look at visually what's happening in Hamlet. Okay, I'm going to move my head here, my talking head over here. let's talk about some of the terms we already know and some new terms. So I'm going to know if you watch this video because when you write your Moodle responses this week, you're going to use some of this terminology in your Moodle response, all right? So first of all, we've discussed mise en scène before, right? Mise en scène refers to all of the objects, humans, props, objects in space, all of the objects in a frame of film, all right? So mise en scène means placed on scene. So basically anything that you see in the composition of the frame. Okay, so look at the mise en scène, how Olivier is drawing from the German Expressionism tradition. I'm going to use my arrow. If you look at this frame, and excuse me, hi, I'm filming, okay? Hi. Okay, so if you look at the upper left corner, you're going to see a frame from a film called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and this was a German Expressionism film from 1919. And if you look, I'm going to use my arrows to point to the angles, very sharp angles. The actors are not in a realistic setting. They're not in a realistic space at all. And angles are really important for indicating a sense of distortion and fragmentation in, hey, Gussie, what can I do for you?
Silent.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I just want a tattoo, but Dad won't let me.
Okay. Hey, can you go downstairs with Dad?
Bye.
Okay. And then there's gonna be a lot of that next few weeks. If you look down in the bottom right corner, you're gonna see a film still from Hamlet. Laurence Olivier's Hamlet from 1948. And again, we see these angles. You can see I'm using my arrow to indicate those. A lot of shadow. This is not meant to be a really believable, realistic set design. It's meant to focus on Hamlet's isolation and the dark mood of the film. I said before that both German Expressionism and film noir are very concerned with the exploration of taboos, of moral corruption, of mental instability. Give me a minute here. There we go. Okay. I'm showing you a film still up here using my arrow. This is a film still right here from a Fritz Lang film called M, which is incredible. If you ever have a chance to watch it, it's free and available online. Amazing film. This is Peter Lorre's first breakthrough film, and it focuses on a serial killer who is killing children in a community, and he never leaves a trace, and it's very difficult to find him. Peter Lorre is the murderer, and there's a big focus on his mental instability. You're going to see a concern with Hamlet's mental instability in Laurence Olivier's film as well. So here, if you look at the bottom left, I'm using my arrow, and the bottom right. In the bottom left, you're going to be a bit shocked when you see Queen Gertrude kiss her son Hamlet on the mouth for a really long time. So you're going to be like, why is this happening? Olivier was very interested in a Freudian interpretation of Hamlet. He was really interested in the idea that Hamlet might have Oedipal feelings for his mother. He might be jealous of the fact that his mother has newly married Claudius. That is an interpretation that I don't love. But it's interesting, isn't it? So there's a way in which the film is really trying to transgress that taboo, that incest taboo. In the bottom right, you're going to see Hamlet there. There's a really nice moment in his to be or not to be speech. This is a sort of a cloud, a misty cloud that's transposed onto his forehead to give you a sense of his disillusionment, his despair. Notice how Olivier uses film effects to point to Hamlet's emotional instability. Again, let's go back to that term mise en scène. Laurence Olivier is using props and objects in the space of the frame to indicate solitude, isolation, and unsolved crime. So in the upper left corner that I'm pointing to with my arrow, this is a frame from Fritz Lang's film titled M, from 1931, and it's an empty chair, an empty place setting, and this is a really chilling scene from the film because it's a place setting for a child who ends up getting murdered, and the mother doesn't know it yet, and she's setting the place for her child, and so the empty chair becomes very emblematic. In the bottom right, you can see a film still from Hamlet, Olivier's Hamlet. Empty chairs appear again in this film in a really interesting way. Here, he's looking at the empty chairs of Claudius and Gertrude, and he's thinking about the vacuum of power that he perceives in the state of Denmark. Here's a term I don't think we've used before. Maybe we have, but I'm going to use it again if we have used it before. High angles. It's a very simple film technology. This is where the camera's up here and the objects in space are down there. That's all it means, okay? There are high angles, there are low angles. High angles can achieve a lot of effects. These are 3 film stills from Fritz Lang's film titled M. He innovated with this all in really interesting ways. God, I hope you watch M this week. It just blows my mind. It's so good. Look at what I'm doing with my arrow. Here, there's a high angle in which the children in the opening scene of the film are singing a really macabre, dark song. And it's meant to isolate the children and show how vulnerable they are. Whenever a director uses a high angle, he or she is trying to suggest a power dynamic, right? So in this upper right still from the film, the character is being looked down upon by a taller character, and that's important for sort of showing how vulnerable this character is. Here's another high angle in which a character is looking up and is powerless in that situation. There are a lot of high angles in Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. You're going to see a high angle when Claudius and Gertrude are leaving the court, and high angles when Olivier uses them. You can decide what you think of how he uses them. What do you notice? Keep in mind, we are reading Maurice Hindel's Shakespeare in Film this week, and I'm sharing the PDF with you in just a minute, thanks to Erin Bernison. Thank you, Erin, for making a PDF for me. He talks about high angles a bit. Think about how isolated and vulnerable Hamlet looks in this scene. Here's another high angle. This is a really interesting moment where Hamlet is up above and he's looking down at Polonius scheming with Gertrude and Claudius. Think about surveillance in the play, spying, people always watching each other in this play. Here's another high angle where Hamlet is above on a dais or stage and he's looking down at Polonius. And this is really important because Polonius is a ridiculous, morally bankrupt character. He's horrible. I hate him. That's just my personal opinion. I'm sorry, I can't stand him. But this is a way to reduce Polonius and to show what Hamlet thinks of Polonius, which isn't a hell of a lot. Here's another high angle. This is during the play within a play, and I love this high angle because here's the royal procession coming down the stairs, and then they're about to sit down and watch the play within the play. And that really gives me a sense of the meta-theatricality that both Shakespeare and Olivier are interested in. We've talked about close-ups in this class quite a bit. Notice what Olivier does with close-ups and voiceover. And voiceover is when it sounds like Hamlet is speaking only to himself during some of his soliloquies, his most famous speeches, to create interiority. And that's what Olivier is really concerned with. He's really concerned with Hamlet's psychology. And I'd like you to pay attention to how he uses close-ups and voiceovers to create that interiority. Deep focus is a term that we have not used much at all in this class, but because black and white film is so good at using deep focus as a technique, I want you to pay attention to how Olivier is using it. In the bottom left corner, you can see Ophelia looking at Hamlet through a series of arches. Both she and Hamlet are in focus. Again, in the upper right, Ophelia is deep. She's in a long shot. We have this middle shot of the back of Hamlet's head. You're able to see both of them. Think about the depth of field and depth of focus and how it allows you to see how remote and distanced the characters are from each other. Another term I'd like to introduce is chiaroscuro, and I think that Hindle might use this word in his book chapter that you're going to read this week. I can't remember right now, but I know it's very important for black and white film. It's important for German Expressionism. It's been important since the Renaissance, really. And to make an example of this, look at this very famous painting, a Renaissance painting by Caravaggio. It's called The Taking of Christ. From 1602, so roughly around the same time that Shakespeare is writing Hamlet. Chiaroscuro just means light and dark. It is exaggerated effects of light and dark. It can occur in color, it can occur in painting, it can occur in black and white. In German Expressionism and film noir, we have a lot of chiaroscuro, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. But before I do, look at how Caravaggio, it's as if there's some source of light up here or perhaps here. It's kind of hard to tell. Maybe it's like right here, a really bright source of light amidst the darkness that's really focusing on the facial expressions of Jesus, of Judas Iscariot, of the soldiers. Very, very interesting technique. Chiaroscuro appears all the time in film noir. Here's a film still of Edward G. Robinson and Fred McMurray from a very famous film noir film called Double Indemnity from 1944, made just 4 years before Hamlet with Olivier. Blinds, Venetian blinds, are a very common occurrence to indicate contrast between light and dark. It's very important to film noir. You see it also in German Expressionism, the chiaroscuro. This is a very famous still from a film called Nosferatu by F.W. Murnau from 1931. This is basically Dracula, Nosferatu, going down the steps. Shadows and light and the contrast between them are very psychological, very chilling. Both film noir and German Expressionism are concerned with this. Here in the bottom right still, you're going to see that chiaroscuro effect in Hamlet. It's everywhere. It's happening all the time. So just be aware of it and think about how it creates an effect on you as a viewer. Sorry, let me get out of that. Here I have another example of chiaroscuro. This is when Hamlet sees the ghost for the first time with Horatio and the watchmen. Look at how bright Hamlet's face is, right? And the light on the satin on Horatio's costume, the light on his shirt, the light on his face, and then the darkness behind them. It's very, very effective psychological technique. I introduced the Latin phrase memento mori a couple of weeks ago. A very simple phrase. It means remember that you are mortal. This was really important as a concept in the Renaissance. I'm sure we're all remembering that we are mortal these days. We need no reminders. We've got plenty of them in our culture. In Nosferatu, that famous Dracula movie from 1931, there are memento mori tropes all over that film. Here's just one brief example of a skeleton that rings the bell at the tolling of each new hour. Here's a very famous film still in the bottom right. In Laurence Olivier, here he is as Hamlet, and here he is meditating on Yorick's skull in the gravedigger scene. So be aware of those tropes in this film. And this is, of course, as I say, drawing upon a very long Renaissance tradition. Jean Morin's Memento Mori from 1600, again, contemporary with Hamlet. It has a little watch or clock, the skull, and then some flowers that are dying. This was a very powerful and popular emblem in the Renaissance. Here's another memento mori from a very famous book by Andrea Vesalius, Memento Mori from De Humani Corporis Fabrica from 1543, and that predates Hamlet by several decades. Here is the anatomy of a human skeleton meditating on a skull. I find that quite dark, but also quite humorous at the same time. It's a very Hamlet-like figure, right? Yeah, I think I could be. Oh, here we go. And there's one more. Again, I'm going to end the way I started talking about mise en scène. Here, I'm just thinking about generally the isolation of the landscape, how the castle in Denmark is surrounded by the ocean and by borders and by boundaries, how it feels like a prison. It's very isolating. We have a sense of that in the final film still from that famous Dracula movie, Nosferatu, a very famous example of German Expressionism. And here is the final scene from Hamlet. I see a lot of similarities between the darkness and sense of isolation in those two films. Oh, I guess that's the end of our time together. Did this help? I don't know. Was it useful? Was it boring? Was it a complex mix of the two? Who knows? I hope you watch this video with friends, with family. I don't know. Share it with people. I don't care. What you're going to do, here's your homework, okay? The homework is on the syllabus. You already know this, so I'm just repeating what you already know because the syllabus is on Moodle and I sent it to you via email attachment. You've got it in multiple forms. Please be organized. Please keep track of these deadlines. You have a whole week to do these tasks, all right? First task, you're going to send me a photo of your diary entry. That's going to prove to me that you watched the video and you tried writing something nice. You're going to watch Laurence Olivier's film, which is available as a YouTube clip, or you can rent it on Amazon Prime, which I highly recommend. It's like $3 if you can spare the money. And you're watching this YouTube video. That's part of your homework. Congratulations. And you're going to read Maurice Handel's book chapter on Olivier's Hamlet. It's very short, very easy. And you're going to post your response by midnight on Sunday of this week, Sunday, March 29th. Please don't forget, that is your participation for the week. And if you could post it sooner, that would actually be helpful because I'm going to try to incorporate your Moodle responses into my lecture next week. I need you to focus on one scene from Laurence Olivier's film. I'm going to ask you to closely read it in your Moodle response. I'm going to ask you to engage with Maurice Handel's essay in some way, use some of his film technology language or my film technology language that I just shared with you in this film. That's how I'm going to know you're doing the work, and that's how you're going to get full credit for participation. All right. So please do the work. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to be providing you with your grades for paper 2 in the next couple of days. And that is it for me. Thank you for listening. And now I'm going to shut off all my bells and whistles. I'm learning. Thank you for your patience. And I think I'm going to press stop. Okay. Bye. Oh, no. Oh, have a good week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.